I do want to trust my government. They have weapons and a monopoly on the legal right to use force. They get to spend trillions of our dollars. But can we trust them? You'd think we could because so many people watch them. If they lie to us, I think they'd get caught and voters would punish them. But my first guests tonight say, no, I'm wrong. Our political leaders mislead us all the time and don't get caught. So first, pollster and word analyst Frank Luntz says politicians rarely get caught because they've learned to use words in tricky ways. Like what?
And it's not just words, it's also visuals. You notice how they stand with voters that look like a Crayola crayon box behind them? That's meant to show that they have the support of all the people. Or sometimes they put American flags behind them because that indicates that they're patriotic. Or sometimes they just look into the camera right there and read from a teleprompter. Barack Obama's the best at it. He's better than any Hollywood celebrity. When John McCain read from a teleprompter, Stevie Wonder reads a teleprompter better than John McCain.
But wait a second, I often read from a teleprompter here. What's wrong with that?
Because they're not your words, they're somebody else's. And that's what
they are my words. I write it, but I can't remember it, so I put it in the teleprompter. I bet Obama does some of that.
I wonder how much he does. They want you to look them straight in the eye and say what you mean and mean what you say. It's the most important attribute. And yet politicians today are constantly saying things that nobody understands, talking over their heads or talking underneath them, and so it doesn't connect.
All right, well, let's break down some of the phrases they use. I noticed President Obama never talks about taxes. He talks about revenue.
Constantly, because nobody wants to pay more in taxes. It's okay for you, John Stossel, to pay more, but I don't want to pay more. So when you talk about revenues, everyone thinks it's somebody else who's going to get hit.
Taxes, I pay. Revenue, it's
everyone.
collecting from somebody else.
Exactly.
So we don't have a tax increase, we have revenue enhancement.
Exactly. They always try to find ways to soften the negative or strengthen the positive.
I noticed during the State of the Union speech, the president said, no more bailouts, no more handouts, no more cop-outs.
Now think about that phrase. First off,
it's appealing.
It is appealing. It was, when we tested this for Fox News, that was the #1 phrase of his entire speech. No more bailouts. He's the one who gave the biggest bailout to the banks.
Right.
No more handouts.
Biggest in history.
What do you call the stimulus? Again, over $800 billion. That's not a handout.
What do you call student loans? What do you call most of his program?
And no more cop-outs. He blames Congress. Whenever anything goes wrong, he blames Congress. So he's guilty of all of those.
So why do we eat it up? Because you said it was the most liked, tested phrase in your group.
Because you, as you said at the opening, and that word trust is so important. It's not brand. It's not reputation. It's trust. It's hard to earn, and it's easy to lose, but if you have it, you get reelected again and again. Look, the Republicans are no better. Back in the 2008 convention, I was on the floor for Fox when they started that cheer, drill, baby, drill, drill, baby, drill. When I say the phrase drilling for oil, what visual comes to mind?
A drill going into the earth.
Is it clean?
Not especially.
No, I mean, and older viewers...
But it's a good thing. It's
a good thing
oil.
to have black goo. It's like Jed Clampett shooting at the ground.
So you're saying the Republicans were dumb in this case?
They were dumb because it's so graphically negative and ugly when they could be talking about exploring for energy, which means exactly the same thing.
Explore for energy, explore for energy. It's not as catchy.
No, you can't use it as a cheer. It's like, explore for energy. It just doesn't quite roll off the tongue. But sometimes you don't do things for cheers. You do them because they're right.
Where do libertarians go wrong?
Oh, that's easy. Privatizing Social Security. If you privatize it, in your ear, you're thinking Wall Street. You're thinking financial executives. What they should be talking about is personalizing it, because that means
personal savings accounts.
Correct. That's the right way to do it.
Ron Paul talks about liberty.
And he should be talking about freedom.
What's the difference?
The difference is that liberty is an ideology to most Americans. Freedom is a day-to-day existence. We want to be free. Freedom, which I know you support, which I know that that's part of who you are. Freedom
support liberty, too.
You support liberty, but liberty is ideological. Freedom is personal.
Thank you, Frank Luntz. Now, politicians can spin language, I get that, but you'd think the numbers wouldn't lie. When the politicians spend your money, they have to tell us how much they spent. So wasn't it reassuring at the most recent State of the Union when the president said,
we've already agreed to more than $2 trillion in cuts and savings.
Yippee, they're finally cutting spending. Now maybe America won't go broke. And Cato Institute economist Dan Mitchell is here to analyze that. Dan, so the president says they've agreed to $2 trillion in cuts. That's wonderful.
And I'd be overjoyed because we have a budget of what, almost $4 trillion? So if we're doing $2 trillion of cuts, we're cutting government in half. That sounds wonderful. Here's the problem. John, what if I came to you and said, I've been on a diet for the last month and I've gained 10 pounds. Isn't that great? You would say, what are you talking about? That's insane. And I said, no. I was going to gain 15 pounds. I've only gained 10 pounds. Therefore, my diet's successful. That is literally, I'm not joking, no exaggeration, that is how the federal government does a budget. Remember last year when you had the Ryan budget and you had all the interest groups saying the world's going to come to an end because he's cutting $6 trillion. Well, again, the budget's less than $4 trillion, so how can you cut $6 trillion?
So it was over 10 years.
It was over 10 years, but under the Ryan budget, government spending was going to increase by an average of 2.8% a year. But because it wasn't going to grow at 5, 6, 7% a year, that somehow magically becomes a budget cut.
And people buy it, and then the press buys it. We're supposed to be these skeptical watchdogs, but I read in the Washington Post about draconian cuts when they're really just slower rate of increase.
The politicians know this game. The special interests know this game. Everyone gets a bigger budget every year. The politicians get to go back to their states and districts and claim that they're cutting spending, which, of course, taxpayers have been waiting for, all through the Bush and Obama years when the budget was going up. And we wind up, sooner or later, being greased.
The Democrats use it, this deceit, for when they want more social spending. The Republicans use it for military spending.
And the end result, as I just said, is we wind up with bigger government every single year. And the trend lines, especially because of demographics, the trend lines are that we're going to be Europe. We have maybe 10, 15 years advance notice. And what's frustrating is that we're not taking advantage of that, even as we see these other countries collapsing into social chaos and disarray.
And as you've pointed out on your blogs, we don't have to cut we don't actually have to cut. We just have to slow the growth of government to maybe 2%, and we could grow our way out of this.
Well, being from the Cato Institute, I actually do want to cut spending. But if all we're trying to do is balance the budget over 10 years, which is sort of the minimal thing that politicians keep saying we should do, if we simply limit the growth of spending to 2% a year, which is about the projected rate of inflation, we'll have a balanced budget in 2022. That's all we have to do. But instead, the politicians are saying, oh, we'll have draconian and savage budget cuts if we have to balance the budget without tax increases. They want to take more money out of our pockets. They don't want to put government on a diet, even if that diet allows spending to grow 2% a year.
Now, we do have something called the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office. Their job is to develop cost estimates for virtually every bill, provide Congress with the objective, nonpartisan analysis. What goes wrong there?
They're governed by the rules Congress gives them. So when the Congressional Budget Office, with that Ryan budget last year, it was the Congressional Budget Office that said it would cut $6 trillion, but that's because they are required to start with what's called a baseline assumption of bigger and bigger government every year. And then if it doesn't grow as fast as the baseline, it becomes a cut. And likewise, on the revenue side, the Joint Committee on Taxation, if you double tax rates, they automatically assume you're going to double tax revenues, even though in the real world, we know that people aren't going to work, save, and invest as much. There's going to be tax avoidance, tax evasion. The economy's not going to grow as fast. The taxable income's going to shrink. But they operate with these blinders on. They assume nobody changes their behavior.
Higher taxes won't affect behavior. Tell us about the Snooki tax.
Well, this is the indoor tanning tax that was part of Obamacare. And the politicians passed a law.
Named after Snooki because...
From Jersey Shore, something like that.
She has a great tan. Okay.
Yes, and it's probably not natural, I guess, is the assumption. And they passed this tax. Okay, we're going to tax these people because we don't like them to do indoor tanning anyhow. Well, what's already happening, we're seeing that the revenues aren't coming in anywhere near what the government projected. And why? Because the price went up, demand went down.
Lastly, these cost estimates we get from politicians. President Bush said the war in Iraq would cost $50 to $60 billion. Actual cost, $800 billion. When Medicare was created, they said it'll cost $9 billion in 1990. Turned out to cost $67 billion, many more now for Part A. How do they get away with this?
Well, they get away with it by lowballing the numbers deliberately.
We just forget?
Well, here's the idea. The government passes a program. We're going to give everybody who walks down this street a $100 check. And we did a survey last year that 1,000 people walked down the street. But guess what? If the government suddenly has this new giveaway program, well, I'm going to change my commuting pattern. I'm going to walk down that street as well. So they don't factor in the changes in behavior. But then, and this is very important, once the government creates a program, what do politicians do the next year? They expand it to buy more votes. And then the year after that, they add a new benefit to it. And what's happened with Medicare, it's not just that they got the fundamental estimates wrong. They did. But of course, once Medicare was created, every new generation of politicians figures out some new expansion, some new benefit, because they want to get the same credit for
We're giving
citizens.
people free stuff.
Yes, and it's free, of course, when you use other people's money.